morning, everybody. Glad to be here today with our author and one of our co-chairs. Excuse me, let me put this out. And glad to discuss this report that we've been working on for about 9 months, I guess it is. So I wanted to just take a moment. You'll hear from both of them later today on their next panel, but we were fortunate to have two co-chairs this year that are a little bit non-traditional maybe for the agriculture sector. Bobby, you agreed to be a co-chair, even though you were not an agriculturalist, alongside Ambassador Ruben Brigady. And I thought maybe just to start off, would love to hear why you agreed to take on this challenge and be part of this community. You're maybe more of an urban guy, if anything.
Yes. No, thanks, Alesha, and mentioning Ruben as well, which was exciting partner to be part of the process. I think for me, and I've spent my career working on and in Africa, both on national security and development issues, and now on the investment side of things. And I think, working on lots of different things, debt relief, security challenges, health challenges in PEPFAR and malaria. And I think the development community, frankly, in the last 2 decades had a lot of exciting success and whatnot. Yet we do have some of these big demographic shifts that we've been witnessing during that time. And I would argue that the agriculture talking points that are normally delivered to me when I was in the White House or when I was at the African Development Bank, they haven't changed much in the last decade. And so that's something that's been a persistent thing, I think, for me. And so, being able to be part of this group, which I think was really diverse, and for me, it was the first time meeting a lot of people in the ag sector who don't work in Africa or aren't involved in development. And I think that blend, which you see in the report that Kwame did such a great job representing, was a real blend in the discussion between things that have worked, and how do we keep with things that have worked and scale, but also bring to light some new things from that people like myself and others are working on in other sectors that might be brought to bear. Obviously, the security challenge, I think, is a big issue, certainly for Ruben and I in our background. I think one of the things we've seen, certainly in the last 20 years, is security is a global issue. I mean, with the rise of global terrorism, whether you want to or not, there's really no ability to kind of be local and bury your head in the sand on security. And then you combine that, especially in Africa, with large spaces that are very hard to govern from a traditional military perspective, whether you're talking about domestic military or global military forces. And these are a lot of the communities we're talking about. And so I think there is a huge security angle. And I think that's one of the things that makes this report and this issue so important. But then obviously myself, I've spent the last 6 years with all my personal capital, professional capital. I think this is one of the greatest opportunities in the world. Yep. So I'm not doing this from a security perspective. I'm doing this because I think this is one of the greatest economic opportunities, is the youth bulge, a healthier, more educated youth that's more connected to the world than ever, and the ability to have distributed infrastructure all across the world and be globally connected creates amazing economic opportunities. So I think it's all those things, and I think the task force was an amazing kind of compilation of those different views, and Kwame doing a great job representing that in the report. Yeah, thank you for that. And you're a genuine believer in Africa. As you said, you're investing in yourself. You're optimistic about all of this, but I think last night I heard Ruben say we can't be agnostic about it. Absolutely. There's not an opportunity to say, I'm not really sure if I believe it's a threat or an opportunity. Absolutely. Kwame, we were really fortunate to have you as this year's author. We really appreciate the way that you integrated all this feedback that Bobby was talking about. But you've been working on this topic of youth and agriculture now for several years. It's a topic that I think there's a lot of opinions about youth and agriculture, and we were hopeful that this would add to the evidence base, and we really think it has. But there are some myths that float around, and there are maybe some points that I know you really wanted to make sure came out of the report. And so I would love to hear from you. What are a couple of myths, a couple of key takeaways you want to make sure the audience hears?
Okay. Well, Alesha, thank you very much for the question. I think, please allow me to begin by thanking the task force and also the research team at Chicago Council. I think it was really a pleasure working with you all, and I really enjoyed my time going through. You made it really less stressful than it has to be.
Oh, good.
And I appreciate that. The feedback and the constructive criticisms really strengthen the policy messages that came out of that report. And I'm really proud to be part of such a diverse and supportive team. So far as the issue of youth employment and also its implications is concerned, I think I will just share a few points. The first point that I believe is critical, and I think Bobby alluded to, is the fact that Africa and Asian affairs is now a global affair. And we can no longer look at it as this is African or this is Asian. And that's because if you think of the fact that global population growth is fastest and youngest in these regions, which also happens to be the regions where the greatest threat to food insecurity is greatest. That alone poses some risk. And if you also think about 2.2 billion people in Africa by 2050, and another 2.4 in South Asia alone. And as these regions continue to account for an increasing share of the of global population, they are really going to exert a lot of impact on the world economy, including these global food systems. And whatever impact that they are going to make is going to be shaped by their young people, the values that they have, whatever trainings they have, the competencies that they have. And the earlier we are able to shape those competencies, the better it will be for us. But I also agree with Bobby that it poses some threats, but I personally see it as a huge opportunity, not just for the United States, but for the globe. Right. So if you are thinking about the sheer numbers, and then the rising income that we'll see, consumer spending in Africa reaching about 6.7 trillion by 2030. And about 78 million households in India joining the middle class just between 2016 and 2021. That is more than the combined population of Texas, California, and Michigan. This is a huge market opportunity that we can take advantage of. So I personally believe that investing in these young people, if America invests in these young people, it's essentially investing in its own future.
Great way to put it.
Yeah. When it comes to the myth, I think there are two that I would share in the interest of time. Youth livelihoods is not just about a quantity. I believe you also need to start thinking about the quality of it. Typically, we talk about it in terms of unemployment. In these low and middle income countries, there are no social protection for the unemployed. So young people have to work in one way or the other, right. Even if it means it pays them very little and under very poor conditions. So when you look at the unemployment numbers, you typically don't see large numbers there. But a large number of them are in what you may call poverty jobs. So over 70% of employment in South Asia and over 60% of employment in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's considered vulnerable employment. So even as we are thinking about getting more numbers of jobs, we also need to think about the quality of jobs that come out. The last one that I want to stress is the idea of an aging farming population. It is true that in other parts of the world, like in the US, in Japan, we are seeing an aging farm population. But in Sub-Saharan Africa, the region is not yet at risk of an aging farm population. Yes, there is a large number of young people that are leaving the farm, but there's still a large number of them that still remain in the farm. And they are putting a downward pressure on the average age of farmers. And some analysis that we did with about 9 countries indicated that the average farming, the age of the farming population ranged from about 34 in Uganda to about 42 in Nigeria. But the question is, the region could be at risk of an aging farm population if productivity in agriculture does not go up to keep some of them at least in there.
Right.
Yeah.
So productivity, one of the key messages I think of the report also is in order for these beneficial knock-on effects to happen in rural areas and economic growth in general to take off, productivity has to go up.
Yes.
It's a fundamental starting point for economic growth, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Great. Well, that is the end of our discussion for now. These gentlemen will both be back momentarily to dig in further on the report, but I just want to thank you both very sincerely from the council. You've been excellent thought partners along with everyone on the task force. And if you could all give them a round of applause. We'll see you in a moment. Femi will come back.
Yeah.